The rain poured relentlessly against the windshield, blurring the world outside, but Simone wasn't looking at the road anymore. She hadn't moved in 27 minutes. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, her breath tight in her chest. She wasn't crying. She couldn't. Not yet. Because right in front of her, through the glass doors of the Midtown Inn on Parker Street, she had just watched her husband of 8 years walk hand in hand with a woman who wasn't her. She'd followed him without saying a word, phone on silent, headlights dimmed, praying, truly praying, that she was wrong. That maybe it was a misunderstanding, a meeting, a friend, anything but what it looked like. But then came the text. Still at church, baby. Prayer meeting's running late. Love you. She stared at the message, hands trembling. And then, with the kind of calm that only heartbreak could create, she typed back, "Okay. I'm out here waiting." What happened next didn't need words, because inside the hotel lobby, as Alexander read the message, his face went white. Slowly, he raised his head, and there she was, Simone, sitting just outside the lobby doors, still, watching. The woman he said he loved. The woman he had just lied to, staring straight at him. No screaming. No crying. Just the look of someone who now knew the truth. And that was when his world began to unravel. Because what Simone uncovered in the days that followed didn't just expose an affair. It tore apart a community, uncovered a history of betrayal, and forced everyone who once called him a man of God to ask, how long had the mask been on? How much of what they believed was ever even real? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of this story. Who was Alexander really? To the outside world, he was a husband, a mentor, a pastor, a man who quoted scripture more fluently than he expressed emotion, a man whose voice filled sanctuaries and silenced doubt. To Simone, he was her anchor, until the night she watched him walk into a hotel with a woman young enough to be a youth group member. So why did Simone follow him that night? Because love may blind us, but instinct never does. Because somewhere in the quiet between evening service and his late-night meetings, her spirit began to whisper that something was wrong. Not just a shift in affection, but a fracture in truth. She didn't know what she'd find, but she knew there was something to find. And what exactly was Alexander hiding behind those hotel doors? A private indiscretion? A double life? Or something that had been carefully concealed beneath Sunday smiles and Wednesday night sermons for far longer than anyone imagined? Over the next 30 minutes, we'll piece together the timeline, the deception, and the devastation. Because the truth about Alexander Grayson, or the man Simone thought she married, is a truth that shattered more than just a home. It sent shockwaves through an entire congregation and forced every person who once trusted him to ask themselves, was it all a performance? Stick with us, because the twist you're about to see changes everything you thought you knew about trust, love, and faith. Simone was the kind of woman people described as steady. Not loud, not showy, but dependable. She taught Sunday school with patience, organized charity events without seeking recognition, and remembered everyone's birthday even when they forgot hers. Her life was a rhythm: work, church, community, and at the center of that rhythm was Alexander. He was everything a Southern church leader was supposed to be. Polished, well-spoken, always ready with a prayer or a verse. To the congregation, Alexander Grayson was a man of conviction. To Simone, he was home. But over time, home began to feel unfamiliar. It started with little things: missed dinners, forgotten dates, late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain. He said church needed him more, that ministry was growing, that people were hurting and he was just trying to help. And Simone believed him, because that's what love taught her to do. But belief doesn't erase discomfort. And some nights when he walked through the door smelling of hotel soap and unfamiliar perfume, Simone would lie awake wondering if she was imagining things. She'd pray for clarity, for strength, for proof that her doubts were just the devil trying to destroy what God had joined together. Still, the distance grew. Not loud, not violent, just cold. And then, the silence. A silence thick enough to drown in. Her calls went unanswered more often. His sermons became generic. His eyes stopped meeting hers. Simone tried harder, cooked more, texted encouragement. She'd send verses, love notes. Sometimes he'd reply with a heart emoji, sometimes not at all. She told herself this was just a rough patch, that marriage had seasons and this was just winter. But then a friend, someone who knew her before the church, before Alexander, pulled her aside and asked gently, "Are you okay?" Simone nodded, smiled, said she was tired, that's all. The friend didn't push, just held her hand a moment longer than usual, because the bruises weren't on her skin, they were in her spirit, and only someone who'd lived through emotional erosion could see it. The facade still held. Social media told one story: vacation selfies, church conference photos, smiling couple portraits framed in scripture. But in private, Simone was unraveling. She started noticing things: receipts that didn't match his alibis, gas mileage that didn't line up with his claimed destinations, hotel loyalty points tied to his email. Still, she said nothing, because to speak was to shatter it all. And then came the night she opened the call log and saw a number she didn't recognize, a number that appeared 12 times in a single day. She didn't call it. She didn't confront him. Instead, she waited. Waited for the next excuse, the next extra meeting, the next skipped dinner. It came faster than expected. That Thursday, he kissed her forehead and said he'd be back late. Prayer circle was running long, and she smiled, and nodded, and watched him leave. Then she grabbed her keys, slipped on a hoodie, left her phone on silent, and followed. What happened next would change everything she thought she knew, not just about her husband, but about the very foundation of the life she had spent years building. That evening, Simone stood in front of her bathroom mirror and stared at her own reflection longer than usual. Her eyes were tired but focused, her mouth set in a line that didn't waver. She texted Alexander, "Spending the night at Dana's, girls' night. I'll see you tomorrow." He replied with a thumbs up and a heart. That was all she needed. By 8:47 p.m., she was parked 3 houses down the street with the lights off, engine humming low. She waited. It didn't take long. At 9:16, she saw the porch light flicker on. Then Alexander stepped out, pressed, polished, dressed in the same suit he'd worn to church that morning. Except now he wasn't holding his Bible. He was holding his phone and smiling. He walked to his car, dialed a number, and as he drove off, Simone followed. From Maplewood to Harbor Parkway, through 2 traffic lights and a quiet stretch of East Lane, she stayed 5 cars behind. No headlights, no music. Just the sound of her breath and the rhythm of her wipers clearing a soft drizzle off the windshield. At 9:41, he pulled into the parking lot of a mid-range hotel, the Midtown Inn. A place neither of them had ever mentioned, but one she'd seen in passing on her way to choir rehearsal. He got out, checked his surroundings, and walked confidently toward the entrance. And then Simone saw her. She couldn't have been more than 25. Tall, long braids, jeans too tight for a prayer circle. She met Alexander outside the lobby doors, leaned in close, whispered something that made him laugh. Then they both walked in, hand in hand. Simone didn't move. Not at first. Her hands were on the wheel, but her body refused to obey. She felt heat rise in her ears, her chest, her throat. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. And then, almost calmly, she texted him. "Everything okay?" 3 minutes passed. Then the reply came. "Still at church, baby. Prayer meeting running late." She read it twice. Then again. Her face didn't change. Her heartbeat did. Then, without hesitation, she typed back, "Okay. I'm out here waiting." She saw it happen in real time. Through the tinted glass of the hotel lobby, she watched as he read the message. Saw his posture shift, saw his smile fade, saw his head slowly lift, and then his eyes found hers, out there in the rain, sitting motionless in their car. The same car she'd used to drive him to Sunday school. The same car he'd borrowed to visit the sick just last week. His expression collapsed. He didn't move. Couldn't. Simone stared at him through the glass, not screaming, not flinching, just watching, like a woman who had waited long enough for an answer and finally got one. In that moment, she didn't need confirmation. She didn't need excuses. She didn't even need an apology. Because when you see the truth with your own eyes, words become meaningless. But what she didn't know was just how deep the betrayal ran. What began as a lie unraveled into something far darker. After that night, Simone didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't confront Alexander in the hotel lobby. She simply drove home, locked the front door, and waited. By the time he returned just past midnight, clothes wrinkled, face pale, she was already gone. Her keys left on the kitchen table beside a note that read only, "I saw everything." What followed wasn't explosive. It was quieter than that, but in many ways, more destructive. Simone withdrew from the church first. No public statement, no gossip, just absence. Her Sunday school classroom was empty. Her seat in the second pew stayed vacant. And soon, people started asking questions, quiet ones at first, then louder. Why had Sister Simone left? Was she sick? On a break? But the truth has a way of leaking through cracks. And 1 week later, a deacon's wife mentioned a rumor. Something about a hotel. Something about another woman. And then it began. The whispers, the side glances, the shifting of loyalty. Alexander stood firm at first, denied everything, said Simone was going through a spiritual crisis, claimed she had grown distant, that they were taking space to pray separately. But the walls began to close in faster than he expected, because the young woman from the hotel wasn't the only one. In the weeks that followed, Simone received 3 separate messages, anonymous at first, then signed. All from women who claimed they had also been involved with Alexander. One had met him at a regional youth conference. Another had dated him before his marriage and said he reached out again just last fall. The third was quiet, hesitant. She said Alexander had counseled her through a divorce, that he offered prayer, then late-night visits, then more. At first, Simone didn't want to believe them, but when she compared the messages, she noticed something chilling. He'd said the exact same words to all of them, promises of spiritual alignment, mentions of God ordaining second chances. And in each case, he insisted on secrecy, claimed they were misunderstood by others but seen fully by God. It was manipulation dressed as ministry. But it didn't stop there. A church accountant, recently dismissed without cause, shared financial records Simone had never seen. There were inconsistencies, travel expenses filed under fake outreach missions, hotel charges masked as lodging for guest speakers who never showed up. In total, nearly $22,000 in unexplained spending, tied directly to Alexander's church card over a 14-month span. And yet, in the pulpit, he kept preaching, as if nothing had happened, as if God's silence was proof of innocence. The congregation split. Some believed Simone, quietly supported her, sent letters, left groceries on her porch without signing their names. Others clung to Alexander's charm, convinced that Simone was bitter, that she had abandoned her post as a wife. And in the middle of it all stood one more woman, one no one expected, the same young woman from the hotel. She came forward in a tearful public statement, defending Alexander, said she didn't know he was married, claimed he told her Simone had passed away. The community gasped. But even then, some blamed her, said she should have known, that she tempted him, that she was the reason he fell. But the truth was, she had fallen too. into a carefully constructed illusion. Because Alexander Grayson wasn't just unfaithful. He was calculated, strategic, selective in his charm, and disturbingly consistent in his pattern. So now, the question was no longer about infidelity. It was about intent, about authority, about whether Alexander had used his position not just to cheat, but to control, to manipulate, to extract. Was this a broken marriage, or a deeper manipulation of power? When the third woman came forward, everything changed. She was barely 22, soft-spoken, recently baptized, and barely known outside the young adult ministry. Her name wasn't familiar to Simone, nor to most of the church. She had joined just a year prior, quietly, humbly, attending every Bible study, taking notes, volunteering in the children's wing. No one suspected anything. And that's exactly how Alexander liked it. In her statement, she said she was promised a future, not just affection but marriage. She said Alexander told her God had revealed a new season for them both, that his marriage to Simone was spiritually over, even if it hadn't been finalized legally. He told her to wait, to stay silent. That once Simone moved on, he would step into his next calling, with her at his side. But the deception didn't end there. This young woman wasn't just misled emotionally, she was financially drained. Bank transfers disguised as tithes. Rent paid on his behalf. A loan she took out to support the ministry that never made it to the church books. She was vulnerable. And he saw it. And he used it. And when Simone heard her story, she didn't cry. She sat still. She listened. And for the first time she realized the pain she endured wasn't isolated. It was replicated, rehearsed, perfected. He had used scripture not as salvation, but as strategy. He used the pulpit not to heal, but to hide. Simone, desperate to prove what so many still refused to believe, took matters into her own hands. With the help of a local attorney and a private investigator, she requested security footage from the Midtown Inn, the same place she'd caught him that night. What they found confirmed everything. Over the course of 9 months, Alexander had checked into the same corner room on the second floor of that hotel a total of 27 times. On at least 15 of those visits, he wasn't alone. The footage was damning. Different women, different dates, same room. Always on church nights. Always billed to a ministry expense account. Armed with evidence, Simone filed a formal complaint with the regional church council. A public hearing followed. Then an arrest. The charges: emotional coercion, misappropriation of funds, and religious abuse. His lawyer pleaded for leniency, said he was morally flawed but spiritually sincere. But the evidence told another story. The receipts, the texts, the footage, the women, and Simone. A woman who had spent 8 years thinking she was losing her husband, when in truth, she was uncovering a predator hiding in plain sight. The trial made headlines. Local news anchors labeled it, "The Fall of a Faith Leader." But for Simone, it wasn't about reputation, it was about truth, about restoring what had been broken, not her marriage, but her dignity. She sat through every hearing, never missed a court date, never looked away when the footage played, and when the verdict came in, she didn't cheer, she didn't smile, she just closed her eyes and exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. Because justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. When the verdict was announced and Alexander was dismissed from his role, Simone thought, just for a moment, that the nightmare was over, that the damage had been exposed and accountability had finally stepped into the room. But truth doesn't always bring peace, not in places where loyalty is louder than logic. Within days of his removal, the church released a public statement, not condemning him, but defending him. They called him a flawed but faithful servant. They called Simone emotional, vengeful, unbiblical. Pulpits that once praised her went silent. Friends who once embraced her stopped making eye contact, and slowly, cruelly, the community she'd helped build turned its back. They said she had humiliated the church, that she had gone too far, that she had let bitterness consume her. Simone wasn't shocked. She had seen this pattern before, just not from people who claimed to walk in grace. She left town 6 months later, quietly. No goodbye service, no farewell brunch, just a rented moving truck and a final drive away from the place she once called home. But Simone didn't stay silent. What started as scattered notes in a worn leather-bound journal eventually became a manuscript, not of revenge but of clarity, a memoir titled Holy Deception. It chronicled everything: the charm, the manipulation, the scriptures weaponized, the women, the receipts, the silence. It hit shelves in the spring and became an instant bestseller, topping charts in faith, relationships, and recovery. Women from across the country began reaching out, not just with support, but with stories of their own, stories that sounded eerily familiar. He had called them chosen. He had quoted the same verses, promised the same spiritual destinies, lied with the same soft smile. Simone's story was no longer just hers. It was a blueprint for how predators move inside systems designed to protect them. And in telling it, she did what no one else had dared to do. She broke the cycle. She walked away from the man she loved, the community she trusted, but she kept her truth. And in the end, that truth became her freedom. In the final chapter of her book, she writes, "You can use faith to save or to manipulate. I learned the difference the hard way." For the first time in years, she felt weightless. No more lies, no more silence. Just her voice, finally heard. But just when Simone thought it was all behind her, just when she believed the story had finally found its last page, her phone rang. It was a number from out of state. A woman's voice came through, hesitant but clear. "I read your book. I think we have something in common." Simone asked what she meant, and the voice replied, "His name was Alexander. He told me he was a widower, that his wife died years ago." Simone didn't respond right away. She didn't need to, because deep down she already knew. It wasn't over. Not yet. What would you have done if you were Simone? Would you have followed him that night? Would you have confronted him in that lobby, or stayed silent and swallowed the truth for the sake of appearances? Would you have believed the other women, or convinced yourself you were the only one? When the lies surfaced, would you have stood alone, even if the entire community turned against you? And when justice finally came, quiet, delayed, imperfect, would it have been enough? Or would you still wonder if the damage done could ever truly be repaired? Was justice truly served, or just delayed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone. Your voice matters here. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life betrayals, hidden truths, and true crime that hits where it hurts. And if you thought this story was wild, wait until you hear about the woman who faked her own death to expose her husband's plan to kill her. That story will shake everything you think you know about survival.